Living in Virginia, you're in the fast lane on the information superhighway. We've invested $3 billion in Virginia's broadband network to give you one of the fastest internet connection speeds in the world, so you can build relationships, bring new business to our state, and meet the future of education. It's amazing what we can do together. Visit VCTA.com to learn how broadband connects the Commonwealth.
From the General Assembly and the City of Richmond, I'm Woody Evans for Cable Reports, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and Comcast, connecting Virginians to their government. We're so pleased to have Delegate Carroll Foy with us today. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Your second session, a very short session, 46 days, about 2 weeks away. You're gonna complete the session. So, how are things going for you?
Things are going really well. I had a great number of bills that were passed, a lot of them very impactful, which I'm really excited about. So it's been a good legislative session for us thus far, and for me.
And I believe one of your bills has to do with Possum Point and the coal ash issue there. Tell us about that.
Absolutely. So in my district in Prince William County, I have Possum Point, and that's where Dominion had a coal burning plant. And so now there are millions of tons of coal ash.
Now, what is coal ash?
Coal ash is basically the residual of what is produced after you burn coal for energy production, and what's left over is coal ash. Now, coal ash is made up of carcinogenics, lead, arsenic, mercury, things that you don't want to have in your drinking water, that you don't want to have direct contact with prolonged periods of time. And so it can be very problematic. And so for years, it has been an issue. North Carolina had their coal ash spill where, because it wasn't taken care of, there was a huge storm that came through and actually broke barriers, and coal ash got into the waterways, and that's what we don't want to happen here in Virginia. And specifically in my district, there are some people who had well water readings that came back with elevated levels of lead and mercury and arsenic. So of course I want to protect my constituents, protect the environment, and get this taken care of.
So what happened? I understand that there has been a bill that apparently will be signed, if it hasn't been already, to deal with the issues that have been generated by coal ash.
Absolutely. So the bill that I've been working on, along with State Senator Scott Serval, who's been a huge advocate for this for many years, along with several other state senators, we have a coal ash bill that mandates clean closure. For years, Dominion has wanted to do what's called cap in place, which basically means they take this coal ash, which has these toxins in it, and basically put a liner on top, some dirt on top, and just monitor it. Well, we don't want to do that because the ponds do not meet current EPA standards, and you want that to make sure that there's no seepage into the ground or water into the water. So what clean closure means is that you have to excavate the toxic coal ash, and you have to move it to a lined landfill that meet current standards. So not only do we require clean closure, but also that at least 25% of all of the coal ash has to be recycled, which is great because come to find out, coal ash can be recycled into cinder blocks and bricks and many other things that we use. And so to have it recycled, I think that's impactful and very environmentally conscious of us to do that. And we're actually mandating things that's beyond current EPA standards. So Virginia is going above and beyond to protect our environment, which I'm really excited about. So it requires recycling, it requires clean closure, no cap in place, and also to deal with the truck traffic or the nuisance that can be caused, because there could be hundreds of trucks that carries coal ash back and forth. So a lot of areas, they're going to have recycling plants on site, which will alleviate a lot of truck traffic. And also our bill allows for the coal ash or the product of coal ash to be moved by rail or barge, which will also help. There's one other factor in there that I'm really excited about. While I push for there to be PLAs in it so that people can have like labor agreements to make sure people are being adequately paid, they're getting benefits for working on these projects. While that didn't make it into the bill, there's actually a labor workforce provision in there that says local labor has to be used or has to be sought out for these projects, because we want to make sure we put Virginians to work, and this is something that will benefit the local communities, and everyone can reap the benefits of this.
Now, this has got to cost a tremendous amount of money, this removal and the truck traffic, those kinds of things. And I know you have to balance that cost against the shareholders of Dominion, for example, and their ratepayers. How is that being dealt with?
Absolutely. So for me, I always put people over profits, and so I understand that there's a cost. So what I advocated for was for Dominion to pay their fair share, because oftentimes it's a cost of doing business. Like, I understand that they were following all the protocols that was mandated at that time, but now we have these millions of tons of coal ash throughout the state that's toxic that needs to be taken care of. So Dominion should, because they caused the problem, they should help alleviate and solve the problem. And so that was what I advocated for. Unfortunately, that didn't make it into the bill. So what did make into the bill is a cost of recovery over a number of years that taxpayers would bear the brunt of the cost or the burden of the cost for coal ash.
The ratepayers or the tax? You said taxpayers. Ratepayers. Okay.
Yes, sir. Ratepayers.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And I've seen estimates that it's going to increase an average Dominion customers' bill by like $5 a month.
That's correct. Yes, sir. That's correct. And so, because of the way that it is spread out, and the time. And because we're recycling, because we're doing all of these different things, the costs have come down. And we also have a provision in there that should be added now, but that I also advocated for, was having the SEC making sure they're the check and balance to make sure that Dominion does not profit off of any of the cost of recovery, that the ratepayers are only paying for the cleanup and not being able to give any money that'll be capital or profit to Dominion. So
the State Corporation Commission will be able to review the books and records of Dominion to make sure that doesn't happen.
That's correct. Yes, sir.
Great. Mm-hmm. Tell us a little bit about the Ella Baker Youth Foundation that you're involved with. Who was Ella Baker?
Yes, so Ella Baker was a civil rights activist. She was a leader in the NAACP. She is one of those oftentimes unknown, unsung heroes in the civil rights movement. So she was someone who helped organize the NAACP and made sure that there was a system in place that everyone could be heard, that people were most effective, that we spread our efforts out across the country, because there was so much need, not only in the South, but everywhere, for the NAACP's reach to help individuals with their efforts to change society. So she was instrumental in that. And so what I like to do is to help spread the word and the impact that she had, and also having a program for my students in my district where they can come down to the General Assembly during session and they can shadow me, interview me, I can answer questions. They can see a legislator at work. They come down, they meet the governor, they oftentimes meet the lieutenant governor, attorney general. They have lunch with legislators. They're able to sit in committee hearings and actually watch us on the floor in session. So, and it's absolutely free to them. So my campaign, we bear the full cost of that, of hotel, travel, food, because I want to make sure that these students can have the experience of knowing what it's like to be a legislator, because hopefully we're building the next people who will take up the charge after us.
Well, congratulations, because we had the opportunity to meet a number of those young leaders here in the studio, and we were quite impressed with them. So congratulations on that effort.
Thank you.
Talk to us about paid family and medical leave.
Absolutely. So during my campaign, I was pregnant during almost the entirety of my campaign with twins, and a lot of people didn't know that. What I didn't know is that once I had my children, that I would not be receiving my full income. So I always assumed that family and medical leave was pay. It's not. It's actually just 12 weeks of job protection. So while I wouldn't lose my job being out of work, I do lose my income. And so when you're going from a family of 2 to a family of 4 overnight, that's not what you want to do. And so I saw myself in a position that now I know that millions of women see their position, themselves in the position of having to choose, do I go back to work to put food on the table and pay my mortgage, or do I spend the time that's needed to bond with my new child? And some women don't have a choice. I know for me and my children, they were born premature because they were multiples. And it was very difficult because I had to go out before I gave birth. So that loss of income was significant. And so I knew that I wanted to take up this charge because being one of the developed countries in this world, and Virginia doing so well economically, it makes no sense that we still do not allow women to be paid or men to be paid for maternity leave or for sick leave. So if you care for a sick parent, or if you yourself comes down with a severe illness, or if you give birth to a child, or if there's a military service spouse that needs assistance, then you have to make those tough decisions, and no one should have to make those choices here today. So what my bill does, the Paid Family and Medical Leave Act, is to say we're going to allow you to get a percentage of your income, which is about 70%, for several weeks to do the things that's necessary, because we all know that everyone wins when you have paid family and medical leave. That not only is there better job satisfaction, but there's a great retention because people can now keep their jobs and not having to make those hard choices between caring for my ailing parent or spouse and actually going out and making money and doing the best I can in my career. So if you give people that leeway and that ability, then I think we win across the board. And I think it's time for Virginia to move forward and do something that is necessary, such as paid family.
Seems to be a common sense approach to deal with that problem. Now, how has that progressed, and what kind of reception did your legislation receive?
Well, it received great reception. It's something that I think people are really turning the corner on and saying that this is something that's needed and necessary. And just because you take care of your workers, that doesn't mean that you're anti-business. And so to veer away from that false narrative and help people understand why this isn't so important, and small businesses and all businesses actually benefit the most for something like this, because you want happy workers. And so what happened was it got sent to a study. And so it's going to go to a study, and we're going to look at exactly how it will affect businesses and workers. We're going to look at what's the best way to execute and implement the timeline, because there's several states who's already implemented it, and Washington, D.C. being one of the most recent. So we're actually following those trends and patterns to seeing what their best practices was so we can execute it here in Virginia to have a seamless transition for paid family and medical leave.
Well, hopefully by this time next year you will be successful in having that passed and signed by the governor.
Absolutely.
Something that didn't have the success it deserved was the Equal Rights Amendment. Talk to us about that. I know you're very passionate about that.
Yes, I'm very passionate about women's equality. And so it was something that I know that it's a nonpartisan issue. I think that equality is for everyone, and everyone should be for equality. So to this day, women are not protected in the Constitution the way that they should be. So the 14th Amendment was really established to help African Americans, and then later on it was extended to also include women. However, race, religion, and national origin are treated at a higher standard in the court than gender.
There has to be a compelling state interest.
Absolutely, that's correct. And so when there's a sex discrimination case, in state court, a woman may win, but when we go to the highest court in the land, the Supreme Court, we lose every time, and we lose big. And that's because we don't have that strict scrutiny standard, and that is what we think that we're deserving. We're deserving that there has to be a compelling state interest in order for anyone, the government, whoever, to be able to discriminate based upon gender alone. So that is what it's really about. And people try to fearmonger and put out misinformation to try to distract and deter from what we're really trying to do. But the message is very simple. You either stand for women's equality or you do not. And we believe that women should have our constitutional rights as human beings equal to men enshrined in the United States Constitution. And until that happens, we will not get equal pay for equal work, where me being paid what I should be paid equal to another man with similar experience, education, etc., will in fact lift millions of families out of poverty. And this legislative session is something that I try to make sure everyone understands. This would be the most important vote that we all take probably in my lifetime, because Virginia is on the verge of being the 38th and final state needed in order to ratify the Equal Rights Amendment. That means we control whether or not 160 million women and children obtain their due constitutional rights.
Now, was there a hearing in privileges and elections at all?
There was a farce of a hearing that happened in privileges and elections. So there were restraints that were placed on the hearing. We could only have, I believe, 3 people. It was 2 minutes each. So you had advocates come down from across the country, and they were not able to have their voices heard to testify and give their personal testimonies about how it affected them, how we still are not seen as equal to men. We are still relegated to second-class citizenship. They wanted to tell those personal stories and how it will affect everyone. What actually happened is that, many felt that we were told that because a certain segment of women don't need it, that none of us need it. And that is not the truth. There is also a play of intersectionality there that many people need to understand that African American women and Latino women, minority women would benefit the most from the Equal Rights Amendment, because as a woman, I'm paid 80 cents to a man's dollar, but as an African American woman, I am actually paid 70 cents to a man's dollar. A Latino woman, 50 cents to a man's dollar. So if we're going to really fix that wage gap, then the Equal Rights Amendment is the mechanism that we would use in order to do that. So to have a woman who may be privileged or successful say, because I don't need it, then no one needs it, I think that's highly offensive. And a lot of people feel as if, we see that now our work isn't done.
And of course, there were some who argued that there was a significant legal impediment in terms of the Equal Rights Amendment, because Congress indicated at one point that it had to be ratified by 1982. That was one objection. The other objection was that there are going to be all of these unintended consequences. Now, I know that you had to deal with those arguments. Tell us about why you think those arguments fail.
Absolutely. So the same way that that Congress had extended the ERA deadline in 1979, I believe, they could do it again. So there's precedents that Congress can actually change or void that deadline, because it's not a part of the substantive language of the actual Equal Rights Amendment. It is like another clause. So it's something that can be done and can be changed. And I always like to tell people, the states, Congress did their job. The states, now we need to do ours. And our job is to get to 38 states, and then it will go to the archivist and then to Congress. And if there are challenges, it will go to the Supreme Court. And we have attorneys, constitutional attorneys that's ready and lined up, who've been preparing for decades for this challenge. And we're ready to go. We have the answers to the people's questions, but we just need the states to do their job. As far as a lot of the unintended consequences, I like to tell people that social progress does not start or stop with the Equal Rights Amendment. So some of the issues they had, such as the unisex bathrooms, men and women using, that's always already happening. Women playing on boys' teams, that's already occurring. I also hear about the draft. I like to tell people that women being drafted, men have not been drafted in years. So the likelihood of that happening is very low, if at all. But not only that, but women can already be drafted. Women were about to be drafted during World War II because there was a need for nurses. And so that had nothing to do with the Equal Rights Amendment. So Equal Rights Amendment is about equality. And then a lot of people try to make the connection with abortion. Abortion is solidified in privacy rights. We're talking about equality. two different things. And something else I'd like to remind people is that Virginia, we already have an Equal Rights Amendment clause. And so none of the fear-mongering that they try to use or the talking points they have about all the unintended consequences have not come to fruition because we already have the Equal Rights Amendment here in Virginia. So if it was going to happen, it would have happened by now. So I think it's a concerted effort in order to trample on women's rights, because it's the same talking points that were used to support not desegregating schools, not giving women the right to vote, because people are worried about the blurring of traditional lines. But we're already there. Women are progressing. We're 51% of the population. We're the majority of the people in colleges. We have this economic power that I need people to understand. We can't have people getting in our way. Women want equality. They demand equality. Not only is it the moral thing to do, it's the economic thing to do, because it's a civil rights issue, it's an economic issue, it's something that is so important to so many people. And I know that I will not stop until, the victory for equality for women is won.
Yeah, I get the feeling you're not going to give up on this issue. Now, what about getting more diversity in our teacher workforce?
Yes. So I have a lot of teachers in my district who have reached out to me, and because I believe constituent services are very important. Barack Obama really inspired me when he said, the American public, you're my employer. I work for you. And I've never heard a person in office say something like that. And so that is my motto also. So after teachers in my district reached out to me, they explained that throughout Virginia, we had over 1,000 unfilled teacher positions, that in particular places like Prince William and Stafford, which I represent, we don't really have short-term substitutes because they're not all long-term substitutes because we don't have teachers for the classroom. So I had several teacher roundtables and town halls to discuss what the problem is and how do we find solutions. And so one of the things that was very stark to me is that the rate of minority teachers that we have teaching in the workforce right now is deplorable. And so I asked, well, what are the challenges and the obstacles that's keeping African Americans and Latinos from, coming into the workforce? And one of the things I was told specifically was the practice test. The practice test is a test that teachers have to take in order to become licensed teachers. And just like the SATs, the GRE, the LSATs, a lot of these standardized tests minorities do not do as well on as their white counterparts for a multitude of reasons. But until that can be taken care of, we do not want this to be a barrier from minorities entering the teaching workforce. So what my bill did is make it so that there are alternatives, that if a superintendent signs off, the teacher meets all other assessments, that they succeed in all these other areas, that the practice will not be an obstacle that will keep them from becoming licensed. And so I was recently told by VEA, superintendent associations, all of these different groups who are in great support of this bill, that this minority teacher diversity bill will lay the foundation and be one of the most instrumental things that have been passed to affect the teacher workforce retention and attraction of these teachers that's been done in decades. So that's something I'm really, really excited about to help not only the teachers in the teaching workforce, but also minorities.
Now, did that go to the House Education Committee or some other committee?
I believe it's the Education Committee, yes. And I believe that has passed. I think it's up in the Senate today.
Okay, great. So you're going to have to go over there and make a presentation.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Right. Well, good luck with that.
Thank you.
Budget. There are a lot of items in the budget. I know there's been some controversy about it recently. As a matter of fact, it needed 80 votes in the House of Delegates. It didn't get it the first time until the Legislative Black Caucus was able to get some promises at least about priorities. Talk to us about that.
Absolutely. So I took a objection and offense to the tax budget and spending. One of the things that was most disconcerting for me is that I saw that at-risk funding was removed out of the budget, that we also had a huge amount of money that was moved from education that would have disproportionately affected lower socioeconomic schools and also majority schools. I also took offense to the fact that we didn't have a refundable earned income tax credit. And earned income tax credit is important because you have taxpayers in Virginia who make $20,000 or less. They would not receive the max benefit from the increase in the standard deduction that we were able to provide. So I love the increase in standard deduction. I think that's well overdue, and it will help give a lot of relief to a lot of taxpayers in Virginia. However, my job is to represent all Virginians, and that includes the poor, and that includes minorities, and we cannot allow them to be left behind. So I don't think it's right or fair to ask for their support, but then when we get here to the General Assembly, we don't always look out for their best interests or do things that will benefit them greatly. So that's what I wanted to make sure I did, and be a voice for them and say, hey, we cannot forget about these bottom 1% of these Virginia tax filers. We need to make sure that they benefit, because many of them won't receive a benefit at all. So basically, if you make minimum wage in Virginia, although you spend a disproportionate amount of your income on taxes, you will not receive any tax relief or tax benefit. That doesn't make sense to me. So a person who makes $22,000 or less, they pay sales tax, excise tax, gas tax, and it takes up a huge portion of their income, even more than a person who makes over $500,000. And that's unjust. So what I came to everyone with was, we need to do more, right? We need to go back to the negotiation table, because we can do better. We can do better for all Virginians, and that's what needs to happen here. So I made the decision to present that to my caucus and to present that to the Virginia Legislative Black Caucus, and with the support of the Commonwealth Institute, which did an amazing job running the numbers and giving us charts and information about the spending and the budget and the tax bill, and how it does help, sometimes the forgotten, the voiceless, the people who don't send in emails or come to committee hearings or can't afford a lobbyist. Those individuals will be hurt the most by what we were about to do. So I decided to stand up on the floor and speak against the $5 billion tax bill, knowing that it could potentially be killed. Because at the end of the day, you have to stand for something or you'll fall for anything. And as a representative of not only the people in 2nd District, but everyone, I wanted to make sure that people knew what we were about to do and how it disparately impacted lower socioeconomic white people, Black people, and Latinos, and that was heard. And so there were speeches on the floor. They were impactful and moving and accurate. And I think that resonated to people throughout the House of Delegates. And so I thought we would get four reds, and we actually got like 24, which forced us to go back to the table and negotiate for things that will actually benefit minorities and poor communities.
Great. Well, one thing I want to say before we finish is you certainly epitomize a quote on your website. If you have it, you have to give it.
Yes.
I believe that was from your grandmother.
That's right.
Good to see you, Delegate.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for watching Cable Reports, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and Comcast. Until next time, I'm Woody Evans. Mm-hmm.